Well, first, you have to look at the practicality of this policy. Look at the routes that Nigerians follow, especially the poor people. You know, it's not everywhere where the train covers for that transportation purpose. And if you look at the minibus, the public buses that the government say want to subsidize 50%, how practical is it like for a driver at the public park to now say, I will collect 50% of the transport fare, believing or trusting that President Tinubu will pay him the other 50%? When and how much is that person going to receive eventually? And then most of these drivers, when they take passengers, they want to collect the money there then to fuel their car. And then how long are they going to wait to receive the remaining 50% from the government to fuel their car, to travel from one place to another? Most of these drivers don't even trust the government. Some of them are not even aware of this policy. So it's something that we wake up in the morning and the minister is saying that there's going to be 50% inflation reduction. And that's another quick policy we've seen in this administration. I don't think much time and much thought has been given to this policy. From economic perspective, everything you want to do as a government, as a policy, you have to look at the costs and benefits. Only God knows how much bill is going to be presented to the government at the end of this exercise. And then the accountability...
Is it really about everything you have to do? Because, I mean, for instance, they tell us that the rail doesn't really make profits. We just need to ease. Sometimes government takes on that burden. That's why it's called a subsidy.
Yeah, what I'm saying is, you talk about the train. I said not everyone can get the train.
Yeah.
And not everywhere the train goes. So, for example, I'm from Katsina. I want to go to Katsina. There is no train from Kaduna to Katsina. So even if the train is zero, all the poor people that will travel from Kaduna to Katsina, they're excluded. People that will travel from Kano to Sokoto, they're excluded. Okay, so the train being zero, it does not affect majority of the poor people. The target is not achieved. And
so eventually it appears as though, sorry to jump in, it appears as though they said, go board the buses at the parks.
Yeah, so I told you about that, because the drivers will not collect 50% from passengers.
Even if they've discussed with them?
With who? With the government?
With government? Do you think they will just announce this without doing this?
But do you think the drivers will trust that in the future, the remaining 50% will be given to them? Because I told you, these drivers don't have the money to even fuel their car now. So with which money are they going to even transport these passengers in the first place? So if the government really has thought about this, will have given these drivers in advance the other 50% that they will use to recoup the 50% reduction and to fuel their car. So you look at the cost and benefit. The benefit is the impact on the economy. Post this program, what's going to happen to the economy? Are we going to see any change? We are going to go back to square one. So you spend a lot of money and we are back to where we were. And the train, you see a lot of people trooping. A lot of people will not get a chance to get into the train. So this is something temporary. It's not for the long term. And as economists, when we look at policy, we look at sustainability of it. You start something, you stop. You are giving some people free tickets or discount on transport, and then a few days after, you're not giving them. So who's going to give them next? And what's going to happen to the economy? Are we going to see change? And these are all from the effect of the way the petroleum subsidy was removed. Because when you have to remove petroleum subsidy, there are so many stages you have to follow. Otherwise, you get yourself into this kind of situation, thinking of what to do, and trying things which might not work. So one of the things that they should have done is to invest in adequate, modern and convenient mass transportation system.
They said they're working on CNG buses.
You see, these are things you do before you remove the petroleum subsidy, because the effect is going to be immediate and massive. Look at the inflation, close to 30%. These are all effect of it. No amount of subsidy in transportation will be enough to alleviate the poverty. And if you look at Abuja here, there are no options for mass transportation. Everyone must own their car if you have to travel. And if you have a big city like Abuja, like Lagos, where everyone must have a car, then you know that you don't have a sustainability in terms of your energy consumption. So big cities around the world, there are mass transportation where people don't have to use their transport, personal, so that you can reduce the cost, the expenditure per capita in the area of transportation. So for me, we should have to look at long term. Instead of spending money here and there and with no impact, we rather, if they have to go and invest in the transportation, let them wait for that. Instead of doing this short-term subsidy, let's do big one so that we can have the impact at once.
And so we see that, independent transporters tend to prey on their customers. Do you think that will have any effect on the tendency of, transporters to want to do this in this season?
If the transporters have the intention or the tendency to increase the fares at this time, they will do it. This policy will not change anything. And we have to do sensitization, orientation of the people to understand that they are also responsible. Leadership is not only by the president or governors. We are all leaders at our levels. So if you have opportunity to make life easy for Nigerians, you should do it. But people have to feel that the government is doing enough for them so that they can also do their part. But if people are thinking that they are being shortchanged, they are their own government. They provide everything for themselves. The government is not any support to them. So they will explore any opportunity to exploit people. So for me, I think if we could have invested in modern transportation, especially transport systems that use alternative energy, that are cleaner and cheaper, especially the use of gas for transportation, which we have a lot of gas. So that could have reduced, even if there are tendency of increasing the fares, even if they have to increase it, it still not be as high as it will have been by now.
And do you think that airlines too should have been given some sort of rebate so that people too who have to fly this season could have felt the discount?
You see, I'm not supporting the transportation subsidy at all. So I cannot support for the mass transit, so for the road transportation, no for the airlines.
You don't support it at all?
At all. Because you look at the accountability of it, which I like what you're talking about, data. Now, if these transporters say we transported 1 million people, how would the government get to know these are exactly 1 million people? So you have to look at where is the data coming from and whether these information are genuine or not. And then you look at the benefits. Now, the president gave me subsidy, went to my hometown, enjoyed my celebration. I came back to Abuja. What happened? What next? Has that changed anything? No impact on the economy. So we are looking at the long term and sustainability of it. And then if you look at now information, the management of the information is also not adequate, because when you are doing a quick, last weekend he said, they had a meeting with all this. Last weekend, today we are Thursday. So now, if I'm traveling to Kazakhstan today, where do I go to get this bus? Do I know where? And do I know which bus? I don't have this information.
All right.
So the information is lacking. And that's why, because this program is being rushed and there is no impact eventually.
All right. Let me come to Prof. When you were talking the other time, you were talking about the fact that, how will the modalities go, particularly for public transport services that are operated by the private sector. Are you in any way comforted or satiated in any way by the response that Mr. Engineer Okiria gave the other time about the selected transporters?
Yeah, like I said, if you say selected, that means there is inadequacy, because you cannot select few transporters to transport everyone. It means that let me give you a perspective. If there are 100 people that go to Katsina today, and then you are selecting few transporters, those transporters will eventually transport not more than 40% of those people. So the remaining 60% are left out. And then you have to also look at the information and the accountability process of that. How do you trace and account for those people that they discounted? So for me, generally, it's the impact that I don't associate with, even though there are modalities which he said, but we have not seen them on public.
Okay.
The only thing we've seen is the announcement that is going to start today. And something that is going to start today, the information should not be available today. It should have been available a week ago, 3 days ago. And that's why we said, if you have to come up with policy, you have to think about it. You have to plan for it. You have to look at the consequences, what's going to happen at the end. Because the reason why we are doing all these things is to have impact on the economy. And if there is no impact on the economy, then why should we lose money? What if eventually the government will spend 1 billion naira on this program? Spending 1 billion naira and going back to square.
Perhaps, what you are essentially telling us, Prof, my apologies for butting in, perhaps one of the things you are telling us is that government has to find a way to be accountable in this. But, when you were talking the other time about, how the whole thing was going to go, how is government engaging the transporters? I remember, and I'm sure you do as well, that government engages public transporters, transport operators, for election purposes through the Independent National Electoral Commission. So how do you think it'll be difficult to get the accountability system going now when we have a kind of template, in that these transporters are used, and we've been using them since the Fourth Republic began for logistic purposes? How do you think that will be difficult now?
Well, I don't trust that there's going to be a genuine and trustworthy accountability process in this. Because, like I said, if we have to rely on the road transporters, there is going to be some information asymmetry, because some information will not be much available to the government. The government will be difficult to hold those guys accountable. They can present any kind of bill, and then the government, I don't think, has any mechanism at place to trace that or to account for that. So for me, even if it has been done before, that should not justify doing it today, especially looking at the cost and the benefit and sustainability of it. So if you have done something adequate in the past, and it does not mean that you should keep doing it. It is not giving you the right result. So it's not about whether we have done it or not.
I just want to, ask two things that I'd like you to speak to very quickly. Number one, do you think it would have been better if government didn't do anything? And secondly, now that the federal government has done this part, don't you think it's also an opportunity for the states to intervene so that we can have more coverage as opposed to not doing anything at all?
Yeah, you see, the last question is good because, the states should have been the ones doing some of this kind of intervention as a temporary measure. The federal government should not do nothing, because doing nothing is not an option, but doing the right thing. Why we are questioning this policy is not because we don't want government to work. We want them to work on the right things. And that's why I talk about sustainable investment in the transportation sector, especially transiting from the PMS and diesel usage to more cleaner and cheaper transportation. For example, the federal government can also open the railway system to allow private investors to build railways and allow private participation to also own these trains and these coaches. It would have been better for the government to focus on these sustainable policies and allow the states to do these short-term measures. The federal government should be looking at the long-term and sustainable policies, because the government will not be an efficient manager of this system. And I think the rail transportation will allow for a cheaper transportation system for a large population of Nigerians. So for me, I think we should focus on the policy of extending the railways across the country, providing alternative buses that use renewable or cheaper and cleaner energies, and allowing private participation to own these trains and coaches. The government can still control the railways after giving a concession to private sectors, so that maybe the charges on using the railways will still come to the government. But the ownership of those trains and coaches will be by the private participants, like we used to have in the UK.